we spoke about this thing about having a long-term plan for your tech sales career. There's typically two paths, right, in sales. You can go into sales management, sales leadership, or you can just remain as an individual contributor all the way. Now, depending on the path that you take, you mentioned that an organization will look at you differently as you grow older in your tech sales career. Maybe you can share a little bit more about that, because I think it was really interesting when you shared it with me.
So now let's go back to the career path, because you said there are two paths, right? And the first path was going into sales leadership. So typically that path may look like, assuming you start from SDR or BDR, and then you go into AE, right? And then you become a sales manager of a small team or enterprise team. And then you may become sales director / country manager. And then you could become the VP of sales of a region, like, for example, APAC. And then you could still go to VP of sales global. And I think that's pretty much the end if you follow this path. Yeah. And I think this is also the most typical path that people consider you as successful in sales. That you made it. Okay. And since I have switched a few different companies, I can tell you that if this is the path you want to go, then it really helps you if you join the company when it's still at an early stage, because then you can have an enormous space to grow into management position when they are adding headcounts and expand. So out of the 4 companies I worked, I could see that happened in Salesforce, in Tableau, and possibly in Loomis. Yeah. And but the downside of management role is that the responsibility is very heavy. If hitting your own number is already considered stressful, just imagine carrying at least 5 people's number and making sure your team hit the quota and hopefully each of them also reach their individual numbers. That is the challenge. I am a mother of 3, and I really see the similarity of nurturing your team the same way as nurturing your children. Maybe just nurturing a team is a little bit easier. And some people are naturally born with such ability to nurture other people. And I have met some of them who could be a good salespeople and a good sales manager. And I would say it would be a real waste if they didn't become a manager. Yeah. So I think those kind of people, if you are that kind of people, then this is the path for you. You will get a lot of satisfaction from your job, and you will also earn loads of money. No doubt on that. Yeah.
But okay. I think, of course, Emily, as you mentioned, it can be stressful, right? Because I ever had someone on the podcast tell me that the thing about being sales management or leadership is that you're dealing with a lot of the times what you're dealing with is not related to sales anymore. It's related to people. Yeah. Yes. So that's the majority of your job. But of course, many people may say, well, then I'll just choose to sell all the way. I just sell higher and higher products, enterprise from, low level kind of products to more expensive and enterprise products. That's actually, a lot of people may think that way as well. Yeah, I'm just going to be a very good salesperson all the way. So yeah, as we are going to that, that's the kind of second path, right? Any thoughts on that?
So this second path, so it's like an AE role, right? And then you could be, many of them, the one I have seen become field sales AE, like really experienced ones, enterprise level. And then they do that until retirement. And some of these people I met are the ones I respected the most, because we know this game is like a quarter on quarter, hitting your quota, right? It's a lot of tenacity, commitment, skills. But when I ask them why, and it's not like these people cannot become a manager. Actually, many of them could have that ability to also managing a team, but they choose not to. And the reason is because exactly the one you mentioned earlier, that they don't want to deal with the people management aspect. And by that, I don't just mean managing downwards on your team, but also managing upwards to your bosses and possibly many other departments. So that's a totally different game than comparing to just being selling and sell to a external customer. I have met very experienced enterprise sales people that say, sometimes it's easier to deal with the external outsiders than deal with your internal people.
Right.
So, yeah. And I would also add on that if people choose this path, their salary would pretty much the same as a middle level sales management role, like at least a sales director kind of pay. If you become the really experienced 15 years enterprise sales rep. Yeah. Now what path 3 may look like is you are starting from SDR BDR, you become an AE, and then you tried a little while, you feel this may not be the thing for you. Sales is not the thing for you. So what could you do then? You actually could go into other departments. I have seen people going from AE to marketing, for example, or AE to sales ops, or AE to sales engineer, or AE to training like myself, or AE to customer success manager or renewal manager. So you can see all these departments are actually our team when we are AE, right? We interact with all of them during a deal cycle. And it is less frequently seen for people to going into these other departments, mostly because the salary of these other departments are, much lesser comparing to sales role. But I personally know people who made all these switches. So they do exist. And I would say the people who make those switches are for different reasons. Some may want more work-life balance and feel sales jobs are too stressful, after they have a family, typically. And some will just feel that the nature of sales is not for them and they like the other things more. And I would say that the skill you got after doing sales, especially the communication skills and the people skills, would help you easily switch to all these other departments. And actually, for the younger SDR BDRs, I hope that if you already feel AE is not the right thing for you, don't be afraid to make the switch. And also, don't feel that you have to become an AE and then to make the switch. Because it's really depending on what you want, right? Sometimes people think becoming an AE will kind of give them more weight on their resume. But on the other hand, I will say that it will also take more time from the past that you could start earlier and accumulate experience in a different role, right? So it really, this is individual basis and you have to make your own choice. But all I'm saying is that don't be restricted in your thinking.
Yeah. And I have to add on, right? I think it's not just about the communication skills, but also as a SDR, BDR, you become very good at research, understanding why the product exists, understanding pain points. And if you put it into marketing, yes, is about, it could be content marketing, whatever, but at the core is to first understand how can we tell people that our product can solve your problem or something. And I think really being a BDR, SDR, I recall you really have a lot of core skills to help you to do a lot of the jobs, like you say, marketing, customer success, a lot easier. So yeah, I personally also seen people who go into from SDR to customer success, to marketing, and sometimes even to sales engineers. I've seen that before as well, which is very common.
Yeah. And the fourth path, which there is a fourth path, will look something like you become an AE and you may do even a sales management role for a while, and then you become an entrepreneur. And for my case, actually is AE and then sales trainer and then entrepreneur. Yeah, so this in-between part could be anything, but the final end is you become your own boss. Now, this is the path I chose for myself. But if I could say one thing to my 22-year-old, then I would say that this is definitely not an easy path. It's not easier than being a salesperson and achieving your sales number, and it may not earn you more money than staying in sales. So just have that in mind. But if you want freedom and in some sense also job security, because in my past, later I will also mention about the layoff scenario. So I myself never felt like I could just have the safety of doing one job until I retire. So I was always kind of having a little, plan B at the back of my head. Like, what if this happened? How could I cope? And I eventually felt that entrepreneur is the path that will suit both my desire for freedom and also to give me this feeling of being secure. Because if I have my own customer, even though it could be just less than 10, but I would not be depending on a company to pay me a salary. And that is also what Rich Dad Poor Dad mentioned in his quadrant, right? But I have not become a big business. I'm just going from employee to self-employed. That's all. Let me make that very clear. And I also want to say that another good friend of mine also made this kind of jump. He was an enterprise field AE for a very, very long time. And then he became an entrepreneur, and his business is opening a comedy club in Singapore. And so these are the kind of not very often taken paths. I think most of the AE turned entrepreneur paths I have seen is that they will choose to become the reseller or partner of one of the companies they have worked for. And that is especially relevant for APAC region, because for the language barrier and the cultural barrier, this American company or other foreign companies is very hard to come in, right? So whoever controls the customer base is the king. And I know several resellers of this model that they could resell many brands of non-competing products to their customer base. And it was just much easier than being a salesperson and selling for a foreign brand that first come into APAC. And I think the reason is because trust and brand awareness takes a long time to build. So for many experienced salespeople, if they feel that playing that always entry market game is too tiring or heavy, they may choose this path. And they are selling something they knew, right? The product they're familiar with, so the risk is also very low for themselves.
Yeah, that's true. And I think, like you say, right, I think it's not just the connections or the experience they have, but I think this entrepreneur route, even I've thought about it before. I think it helps that in sales, you have this mindset that, okay, I have a number I need to hit, I have a quota. So your mind is trained to, okay, I need to bring in revenue. And when you run your own business, you firstly, you don't have a base pay, you pay yourself, but your mental state is already ready for that. You know that you constantly have to bring in revenue. So I think it's very interesting that you talk about that fourth path, which is entrepreneurship.
Yeah. And I will also add the last path 5, which is what if you have to exit the game voluntarily? And by that, I mean a sudden layoff. I know one of your previous podcasts has already talked about this. And although this is not the path that most people like to think or talk about, but I think it's very relevant for our present time. Because I think starting from my time going into sales, I have already seen a few times of layoff, just myself. There are companies who go bust or being merged, or sometimes they are just at the starting phase and there is the invisible hand of the capital behind it. And so I see that people are treated more and more like a resource rather than a loyal employee. And it is seen that salespeople can be easily replaced, but it is actually not true. Okay. It's not enough time for me to talk in depth about this in this podcast, but all I want to say is if you got a good reputation in all the companies you have worked for as a salesperson, you would have friends to help you during this difficult time. The few times that I witnessed a layoff, the people I knew being laid off actually all find a new job quite easily within a few months' time. So I think that proved my earlier point that salespeople cannot be easily replaced, and actually they are constantly in shortage.